Hello, everybody. Today we're talking about revision. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share um, some paragraphs and some tips. And ideally, this is more interactive and we would have many, many people. Right now, we have an audience of a few students. Um, and you can use this video presentation to help inspire ideas when you're asked to revise, if nothing else. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Uh, you cannot minimize. Okay, so my colleague Samantha Hensley and I prepared this together. I gave the bare bones, and then Samantha did a lot of work on this to make it shine for our visual pleasure. Um, so I'm going to talk some about what we have here. Nice. Okay, this is a list of what each slide is going to cover. Um, and you're, of course, free to access this on your own at any time. This will be posted on our website. Okay, what is revision? Well, literally, it means to see again, as those eyes um, are telling us. And there are many reasons to revise. You might be asked to add something by one of your professors. You might be asked to reorganize, and you may need to rethink how you want to structure or what particular thing you want to add. And all of that is revision. And we have a bunch of questions here that you want to ask yourself if any of your colleagues or if any if you have something that you think could use revision. And the truth is, most things can be improved by revision, if not all. So, organization, as I mentioned, vocabulary, if there's a purpose to it, do you feel that purpose is being served? Can it be served in a stronger manner? Um, you may have revision instructions as well, and you have to be sure that you're following those, especially if you're enrolled in a class. If there's an argument, it's got to be supported throughout. That's a very, very important part, especially in major in social science fields. Um, Creative writing might not be as much of a priority, but it still could be. Okay, so you want to ask yourself if you may have written too much. In the old field of newspaper journalism, yes, that used to be very popular. Um, the saying was always, it is always easier to cut than add. And that's true with revision as well. So sometimes, in my own experience teaching composition, I've observed that students think that bigger necessarily means better. And that's not really the case generally. Sometimes bigger can be better, but sometimes you can say something in a more concise way and be just as powerful. So that's something to think about. Um, Regarding subtlety and directness, if you're making an argument, sometimes you might feel that you need to add something, or someone else may feel that way. Many of you have been in classes where you do peer revision, and one of your friends in class or colleagues in class might say, I think you could use something else in here. And sometimes you'll get differing opinions, okay? And that's the challenge. Okay, citation format can be an issue in revision, but as we're going to get to, I believe, in the next slide, um, solely fixing citation is not revision. I'm not going to say it's not important. I mean, there are other things that are important too that are not revision. Okay, and there's also tone of language. Okay, um, certain words have connotations and denotations. Okay, so you want to be certain that you're using the proper tone in your language. Okay, and also in your sentence structure, especially if we're talking about a creative writing assignment. Mechanical and grammatical rules are often not as rigid when dealing with creative writing, provided you are conveying the proper meaning. Okay, these are all things to think about. And it is true that revising in a criminal justice class is different than revising in a poetry class or in a literature class. And what I'm trying to do is, regardless of your interests in your major, trying to get you to think about what revision is. Okay, these 5 things alone, or if these are the only 5 things you do, these are not revision. And at the same time, I want to say they're important, but you didn't revise your paper if this is all you did. Okay. And this is especially important once you are in a class for your major. Okay. Just because your writing is grammatically correct, formatted properly, things are cited correctly, and you're not plagiarizing and you can spell, does not mean it's really good writing. I would assess those types of papers as competence. I would say that college students should aspire to be more than just competence. And of course, one of them is spell checking. Okay, and I'm sort of repeating what I was saying before, but just making sure you can spell, and believe it or not, imperfection is something that we all endure from time to time because spell check doesn't pick up everything. If you write SEA instead of SEE, spell check might not pick that up. Okay. Um, okay. And there are examples on here. I don't want to spend too much time on this particular slide only because it's not revision. These 5 things are not revision unto themselves. They can be part of a revision project because it is changing things, but these unto themselves are not revision. Okay, so there are many strategies that you can use. You may or may not feel you need to use all of them. Okay. Reading your work aloud is important if you lack confidence in a particular skill you may have. Okay, because as I have found when I'm working with students, I'll ask a student to read something aloud and I will say, how does it sound to you? Now, very often the student will not really know exactly how to improve it. And sometimes I can help with that. But the student will say, it doesn't really sound that good. And then we can have a discussion. Let's talk about why. Beyond And this will go beyond just addressing any mechanical problems, okay, which do relate to problems with revising sentences and paragraphs. Okay, so and if you feel you would like to read your work aloud to someone who will be able to hear things, please make an appointment with one of us. Get a second opinion. Well, this is why many instructors do peer revision sessions. And this is why if your class does peer revision sessions, please don't miss them. Okay, that's what I can say about that. Regardless of whether it's part of your grade or not, when I teach, I make it part of my grade. Not a huge part, but it is a part. If you're in a class where you don't do peer revision sessions, please feel free to make an appointment with us. Okay. And we will talk you through this. And this applies to everybody at all levels of their confidence and all levels of their skill. A reverse outline. A reverse outline is used to ensure that you are following your plan. And in the case of when you have a clearly outlined assignment, that you're addressing it. And that's very important for your grades. Okay. Um, Printing it out. Yes, you can still use paper in today's day and age. It is helpful because you can mark things down, and then your editing, which will nearly all the time today be done on a computer, you can find it, search for the place, and do it. Okay. Did you know that cut and paste in Word comes from the idea of putting newspapers together in the past when you would literally cut and paste? Now we don't do that anymore, right? Okay. If you are writing for a more general audience, like if you are in an organization here on campus and you're trying to reach students, you are likely going to collaborate with others in your group and decide how do we best reach students. And this is true regardless of the audience, regardless of what you're writing and who you're trying to reach. And that is an issue in revision. Okay. Some of you may try to get published in academic journals. And if that's the case, you have to understand what that audience wants to read. That is challenging. I encourage you to try it nonetheless. Okay, so here we have um, an unrevised paragraph. This is going to be our basic paragraph, and it appears that on screen for our audience, my audience cannot see all of it, right? So I'm going to read it out loud for my audience. Catherine. Today's racial discrimination is hidden and isn't seen. The civil rights movement was a time where segregation was seen and aggressively implemented. King's actions on ending de jure segregation were the turning point for better things to happen. King ended the segregation but did not stop people from discriminating. In today's world, there are still groups of people being discriminated in their jobs, court trials, and every level of life because of their skin color. So that is going to be our introductory paragraph to revision. Okay, I am hoping that everyone who sees this in the future looks at the paragraph and says that can be improved in at least one way. Maybe my audience, since it's so small, can pull up a chair here so that we can see the paragraph together. I have an audience of one. I will not try to be try to conceal the reality. I have an audience of one. Okay, so we have Today's racial discrimination is more covert than overt. During the civil rights movement, de jure segregation and overt discrimination were combated. Martin Luther King's campaign assisted in making de jure segregation illegal. The movement ended de jure segregation but didn't address discrimination. In today's world, there are still groups of people being discriminated against in the workplace, in court, and in every level of life, still because of skin color. This is a revised paragraph, okay? I am going back to the previous paragraph so we can compare. Now I'm going ahead. Oh, I didn't have to do that. I had forgotten that we had already set it up so that the two paragraphs are side by side. So you can think about the differences and why one is better than the other. I will rarely make declarative statements, just like I will rarely tell people what to write, even in classes that I teach. However, in this case, one paragraph is better. Okay, now I am taking the revision from the previous paragraph, and now there's another revision next to it. Okay, so we have the revision to the left, and now to the right, we see this. I'll read this one out loud. Martin Luther King became a leader for the campaign to end segregation by law in the United States. Alongside de jure segregation often was overt discrimination. While King's movement was successful in ending codified legal subjugation of African Americans, it could not address all forms of segregation and thus all discrimination. Covert discrimination can fester in areas where de facto segregation still exists. While segregation is likely to always exist, it should not be supported by law and it should not be accompanied by oppressing others, either covertly or overtly. Over the past 10 years, the United States appeared to be making progress against its discriminatory past. However, now many feel the country is moving backward, though areas in which people are mistreated because of race, religion, or gender are more known than in the past. So I'm going to make another declaration. The paragraph on the right looks at the bigger picture, while the one on the left is more just historical events. When you are writing about a social science and you look at the big picture, that is usually helpful to you. It enables you to start going big, then you go small, then you go big again at the end. Okay. What happened? Okay. So we're looking at the first revision where it says today's racial discrimination is more covert than overt. During the civil rights movement, de jure segregation and overt discrimination were combated. Martin Luther King's campaign assisted in making de jure segregation illegal. The movement ended de jure segregation but didn't address discrimination. In today's world, there are still groups of people being discriminated against in the workplace, in court, and in every level of life, still because of skin color. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Catherine, what do you think is one thing that could be improved there? I don't know whether it was improved in the other revision, but what do you think?
Just from looking at it, it just seems like this one is just making more of a general statement of what was happening versus in that other revision, the second revision, it was a little bit more detailed.
Okay, that's fair. Um, Anything about the vocabulary that you might want to say in this one?
I guess I would say personally that it seems very like repetitive. Like there's a lot of words that are being repeated over and over
I agree with
in
that.
a sentence.
I agree with that. And when you're trying to be direct, and you may have this experience on your own, sometimes you're going to use the same word again. And that's why when you revise, you should be looking at it and saying, well, can I come up with a better word and improve it? And of course, I understand when you are writing very often for grades, if you are looking to write the perfect paper, you're going to be writing all the time. You won't sleep. But one of the things to keep in mind is avoid repeating words and phrases. Try to come up with different ways to say it. Okay. All right. So the third paragraph, the second revision. Okay. I'll read that one aloud again. Martin Luther King became a leader for the campaign to end segregation by law in the United States. Alongside de jure segregation often was overt discrimination. While King's movement was successful in ending codified legal subjugation of African Americans, it could not address all forms of segregation and thus all discrimination. Covert discrimination can fester in areas where de facto segregation still exists. While segregation is likely to always exist, it should not be supported by law, and it should not be accompanied by oppressing others, either covertly or overtly. Over the past 10 years, the United States appeared to be making progress against its discriminatory past. However, now many feel the country is moving backward, though areas in which people are mistreated because of race, religion, or gender are more known than in the past. Okay, so why why does this improve the paragraph, Catherine?
Well, this one definitely this has a stronger opening as well, like the first sentence, because you're setting up what this paragraph is going to be about, versus the other paragraph didn't really have that one. And
Okay,
then in this one, it's more. I want to say it's more detailed. Like they're talking about the specifics about how racism shouldn't be supported by law and how it shouldn't be accompanied by oppressing other people. Whereas this one kind of just generalized it at the bottom.
fair. Um, Now, those of you that are seeing this on our website, can you say this better? You might be able to add more to this. I would say, however, I is this a perfect paragraph, Catherine?
I wouldn't say so.
I wouldn't say so either. Okay, here are some things that I don't like about it. I say to end segregation, and then I say de jure segregation. Then I have segregation again in the sixth. I mean, is there a better word for segregation? Maybe, I don't know, but right, it's about segregation. So, I mean, again, it all depends upon how obsessive you are about trying to build the perfect paper. Okay, clearly, though, this is a better paragraph than the other two. Okay. Okay. Do you only revise work based upon nonfiction? No. This is um, from a prompt, perform supplemental Blythedale romance readings in culture studies, biography, or criticism. Each student is to write a one-page explanation of their passage and explain what the passage has to do with the Blythedale romance or what the reading of the book is. Now, some of you have read this, uh, only because there is so much reading out there. I would say most of you have not. And this is a paragraph which you could revise. And it's something that we could discuss. And there would be no grade. That's the even better part. Okay? Because um, very often, I believe students are intimidated by revising because they feel if they do it in quotes wrong, their grade will not improve. Okay? I try to give very detailed revision instructions to my students. Okay? And I believe I speak for most to all of writing faculty. Okay. Um, so here's an opportunity for you to say to yourself, hmm, here are the ideas. How can I express them better? Okay. And you have citations in there. They're MLA citations, I just want to say, and you would need to either paraphrase them or cite them again if this were for a grade. However, if you work on revising with us, it's not. Okay, here's another really good one. When I say good, I mean it's a good opportunity for you to revise. Okay, this is a great one for you to revise on your own and talk to us about. Okay, so, but I am going to ask Catherine, my audience, what are some things that need addressing here? Okay, so in the 1800th century, education was hard for students to process in class. It was difficult to teach a class filled with students who need to be taught in different levels. Going to school would be an obstacle for students who live far away from school. Long distance schools would be hard for students who would have to help their parents with work. Education today has impacted students with their social life and provided them with advanced technology. So, Catherine, what are your comments on that paragraph?
Honestly, I feel like there's a lot wrong with it. I guess number one, starting would be like kind of like the grammar of it. I guess it depends. It all goes back to your first question when you were saying who is the audience for this, because the language here doesn't seem like it's, I want to say, at a college level. It just seems kind of bare minimum.
Yeah. Um, are the ideas clear in this paragraph? Do you understand?
Not really. They're
Hmm.
all kind of jumbled as well.
No, well, see, I I sort of disagree with that. I mean, I can tell in the 1800th century, I think I know the student means 18th century. Okay. I don't know if we'll be alive in the 1800th century. I mean, there was a movie, Don't Look Back, about people escaping climate change, and the people did, and um, they escaped to the future of like the year 2030 or something. No, not 2030, like 2300. And then they went on this planet and they were eaten by dinosaurs. So they didn't make it. But in any case, um, I mean, grammatically, education was hard for students to process in class. Makes sense to me. It was difficult to teach a class filled with students who need to be taught at different levels. Well, a class filled with students. Why do you need filled with students, right? I'm going to stop right there because you all need to revise that as you read it. But just be just because the ideas are clear and there there are no serious grammatical, syntactical, mechanical issues, it doesn't mean that it's well written. Okay. Um, so keep that in mind as you write your own material and revise it. Okay, here's another one. I'll read this one out loud. The United States of America needs a lot of teachers who teach students. The decline in education in the United States may have a long-term impact on the future of the United States of America. So, each of the bad teachers must be treated by raising their performance as they must pass certain tests. However, for good teachers, there must be high salaries to encourage them to give more. There are no private schools in Finland, from kindergarten to university. So, what are your comments on this one, Catherine?
Well, the first thing that I noticed was the last sentence in this paragraph. It doesn't go with the rest of the information that's being given.
Uh,
Like
un-
there's no introduction to Finland.
unless the student expects the audience to understand that. Is that a fair expectation generally?
Not
No,
generally.
no, no, not usually, right? If, okay, and a lot of teachers who teach students, what is it that teachers do?
Teach
They teach students. We're going to leave it at that. Okay, here's another revision opportunity. I'm not, we're We're not going to focus on everything that you could adjust to, but these are things that actually, from time to time, every writer does, puts in words that you don't need and have disconnections. And so these are things, all things to think about. Okay. Throughout history, women have been the inferior to the man, even though in reality they are not. Women throughout history have been in a constant battle to fight the stigma. Even though the 19th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution gives the right to vote to women, they still struggle daily to not be stereotyped into gender norms that the man is the superior. The fight for women to be treated equally has been a long one and been very rigorous and is still being fought today, especially in the past 4 years. Catherine, do you think this paragraph is a better paragraph than the last two? Or is it about the same? Or what would you say about
I
that?
was thinking that this one sounded a lot better.
Yeah. Does that mean it shouldn't be revised?
No, every paragraph should be revised.
Very okay. I agree with that. Um, okay, I am not going to give anything away because I know that people are going to read this and say, I want to revise that. You need to look at that first sentence. Okay. There is perception and reality, and different words can be used to imply perception as opposed to reality. And there are no such words in that first sentence, making the sentence contradictory. I will say that. And I want everyone who views this to think about what I just said. And hopefully you'll all come in and talk about how you want to revise these paragraphs, and we can have discussions, not just with me, all my colleagues will also be familiar with these. Wow, interested in more? Well, you can um, scan the QR, go to that website, set up an appointment. Okay. And here we go. I'm not on here, but that's fine. I'm Dr. Michael Walters, and I'm at mwalters at njcu.edu if you'd like to get in touch with me. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Thank you, Catherine. And we have Works Cited because when you cite a source, you need to put it on your Works Cited page in MLA format and put your citations. Thank you. Okay, it has been my pleasure, and I hope to see some of you down here in the Writing Center, either in the summer or the fall, um, to talk about revision. Bye-bye.